The pit bull lunged forward, teeth bared, a guttural growl tearing from his throat as he launched himself at Mark. Sarah screamed, grabbing the dog's collar, her fingers digging into the leather as she pulled with everything she had. For 4 perfect weeks, everything had been fine. They'd brought home this rescue dog, this gentle soul who'd slept at the foot of their bed, who'd learned to sit and stay and come. But now he was a different animal entirely, freezing at doorways when Mark approached, his body rigid with tension. One evening, when Mark tried to correct him with a light tap after blocking him from the food bowl, the dog's fear exploded into something darker. What they discovered about why he was acting this way was so shocking, it changed how they understood trauma forever. Before watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another heart-gripping story like this one. Sarah had wanted a dog for years. When she saw Brutus at the shelter, his brown eyes soft and pleading behind the chain-link fence, she knew he was theirs. The shelter worker had been honest. Pit bull, unknown history, possible abuse. But Brutus had been perfect those first weeks. He'd curl up beside Sarah on the couch, his massive head resting on her lap. He'd greet Mark at the door with a wagging tail. They'd congratulated themselves on saving him, on proving that pit bulls weren't the monsters people feared. Then week 4 arrived like a storm they never saw coming. "He won't come inside," Mark called from the back door one evening, frustration edging his voice. "He's just standing there staring at me." Sarah walked over, and immediately Brutus trotted inside, tail wagging. Mark's jaw tightened. "That's the 3rd time today." "Maybe he didn't hear you," Sarah offered, but her voice wavered. She'd noticed it too, the way Brutus positioned himself between her and Mark on the couch, the low rumble in his chest when Mark reached for her hand. "He heard me fine," Mark snapped. "He just doesn't want to listen to me." That night, Sarah lay awake. Brutus pressed against her side of the bed. Mark's breathing was steady beside her, but she could feel the tension radiating from him even in sleep. Something was shifting in their home, something dark and confusing that she couldn't name. The food bowl incident changed everything. Mark had been filling Brutus's dinner bowl when the dog rushed forward, nearly knocking him over. Instinctively, Mark used his leg to block him. "Wait," he said firmly. Brutus froze, but his eyes had changed. Something wild flickered there. When Mark reached down to tap him gently on the shoulder, a correction he'd seen on training videos, Brutus's lip curled back. "Mark, don't—" Sarah started. The growl started low, building into something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Brutus's entire body went rigid, hackles raised, every muscle coiled. Mark stepped back, hands raised. "Easy, boy, easy." But Brutus advanced, step by deliberate step, his eyes locked on Mark with an intensity that spoke of something broken inside him. "He's aggressive toward men," the trainer said 3 days later, watching Brutus through the window. Inside their living room, Brutus lay peacefully beside Sarah. But the moment Mark entered, the dog's demeanor shifted. Alert, watchful, dangerous. Probably abused by a male owner, the tap you gave him, even though it was gentle, it triggered something. Deep trauma. "So what do we do?" Sarah's voice cracked. She'd been crying on and off for days. The dog she loved was turning their home into a war zone. "Rehoming might be the safest option," the trainer said carefully. "This kind of male-directed aggression, combined with resource guarding, it's a difficult combination. He's guarding you, Sarah. You're his resource now, and your husband represents a threat." Mark drove home in silence. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, Brutus in the back, and felt her heart breaking. They'd promised to give him a forever home, but how could they keep a dog who might seriously hurt Mark? "We'll call the shelter tomorrow," Mark said quietly that night. His voice was hollow. "It's not safe, Sarah. You saw how he looked at me today. That's not fear any more. That's intent." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. In the corner, Brutus watched them both, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. But that night, something shifted. Sarah woke to Brutus standing beside the bed, his body pressed against her side, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Mark with that same intense focus, but different somehow. Not aggressive, alert. His nose twitched, and he let out a soft whine, then a sharper bark. "Brutus, stop!" Sarah whispered, reaching for his collar. The dog pulled away, something he'd never done with her. He barked again, louder, and then did something that made Sarah's chest tighten with confusion and anger. He grabbed Mark's sleeve gently in his teeth and pulled. "Get off!" Mark jerked awake, yanking his arm away. "Sarah, he just bit me." "He didn't bite, Sarah turned on the lamp. That's when she saw it. Mark's arm from wrist to elbow was covered in raised red welts. Not from the dog. They'd been there, hidden under his long sleeves, spreading. The skin looked angry, inflamed, some areas beginning to blister. "Mark, your arm—" "It's just a rash," Mark said, but his voice had changed, uncertain now. "Started a few days ago, probably from the new detergent." But Brutus wouldn't stop. He barked again, more urgently, and this time when he grabbed Mark's sleeve, he pulled harder, exposing more of the rash. The smell hit Sarah then, faint but distinct, sweet, wrong. "Mark, when did this start?" "I don't know, maybe a week." He was looking at his arm now, really looking. "It's been itching like crazy, but I thought—" "A week?" Sarah's mind raced. A week ago was when Brutus's behavior changed, when he started positioning himself between them, when he started focusing on Mark with that unnerving intensity, not aggression, vigilance. "We're going to the emergency room," Sarah said, already reaching for her phone. "Now." Mark started to protest, but then he looked down at his arm again. In the lamplight, the rash looked worse than it had moments ago, spreading, and he felt it then, the fever he'd been ignoring, the exhaustion he'd attributed to stress. The ER doctor took one look and called for immediate treatment. "This is a severe staph infection," she said, her voice tight with concern. "More RSA, most likely. See how it's spreading? Another day, maybe two, and this could have entered your bloodstream. Sepsis. We're starting IV antibiotics immediately." Sarah stood in the hospital corridor, her hands shaking. Behind her, through the window, she could see Mark hooked up to monitors, an IV line running into his arm. The doctor had used words like life-threatening and critical timing. "Your husband said your dog has been acting strangely." The doctor stood beside her now, chart in hand. "Aggressive toward him specifically?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "We thought he had trauma. That Mark triggered something when he tapped him as correction." The doctor nodded slowly. "Dogs can smell infection. Their olfactory system is thousands of times more sensitive than ours. They can detect changes in body chemistry, bacterial growth, even cancer. What you interpreted as aggression was probably anxiety. The dog knew something was wrong with your husband. He was trying to alert you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every moment over the past week replayed in her mind with horrifying clarity. Brutus freezing at doorways not out of fear, but trying to get them to notice. The intensity of his stare, not threatening, but desperate. The way he'd positioned himself between them, trying to draw attention to Mark. The growling, the lunging, all of it an escalating attempt to communicate what he could smell, but they couldn't see, and they'd almost given him away. Sarah's knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "We thought he was dangerous," she choked out. "We were going to take him back to the shelter, tomorrow. We'd already decided." "If it hadn't been for that dog," the doctor said quietly, "your husband might not have made it. MRSA doesn't wait. Once it enters the bloodstream, the mortality rate increases significantly. Your dog saved his life." 3 days later, Mark came home. The antibiotics had worked. The infection was responding to treatment, and the danger had passed. Brutus met them at the door, his tail wagging tentatively, his eyes searching Mark's face. Mark dropped to his knees, and for a long moment he just looked at the dog who'd been trying so desperately to save him. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Brutus moved forward carefully, pressing his massive head against Mark's chest. Not aggressive. Never aggressive. Just a dog who'd been trying to protect his family the only way he knew how, even when that family had misunderstood every signal, every desperate attempt to communicate. Sarah watched them, tears streaming down her face. Mark's arms wrapped around Brutus, and the dog's tail began to wag faster, his whole body relaxing in a way it hadn't in weeks. "The trainer said he was resource guarding me," Sarah said softly. "But he wasn't guarding me from Mark. He was trying to guard Mark from what was happening to him." Mark nodded against Brutus's fur. "All those signs we thought were trauma. The freezing, the staring, even when he grabbed my sleeve, he was screaming at us in the only language he had." That night, Brutus slept between them on the bed, something they'd never allowed before. His breathing was steady, peaceful. The tension that had coiled through his body for weeks had finally released. He'd done his job. He'd made them understand. Sometimes the line between life and loss is guarded not by those who speak our language, but by those who see what we cannot. What we fear often protects us from what we cannot see. Brutus hadn't been broken by his past. He'd been made vigilant by it, and when danger came wearing the invisible face of infection, he'd known. Instinct speaks louder than reason when danger hides in plain sight, even when that instinct looks like aggression, feels like threat, and tests every assumption we hold about trust and safety. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Share it with friends and family, because sometimes the ones we almost give up on are the ones fighting hardest to save us.